Hi, it's Tony Chapman. I'm the host of the podcast Chatter That Matters. 2008, something very special happened to me. I was inducted into the Canada's Marketing Hall of Legends. It's one of the proudest moments of my career because my family was there, one of the proudest moments of my life. You see, in this hall are people that have put a dent in the marketplace. We have visionaries who came up with ideas. We have business builders that not only established their brand in Canada, but around the world. We have stewards of brands who found a way to engage the head and heart and hands of the consumer and the media. We have leaders and creators that built campaigns that dance all over media. This is more than the Hall of Legends. If you think about it, it's the Hall of Learning. Imagine the intellectual resource that exists within it. The lessons in life, the journey, the overcoming circumstances, the tightropes, the way they reinvented and reimagined the world. The American Marketing Association's Toronto chapter came up with this idea of curating this learning. And what they've done is they've created the Legends Journey, Lessons in Leadership. We're gonna take some of the people that are in this hall, spend some time interviewing them, draw out what they bring not only to your livelihood, but ideally to your life. So thank you for being part of Lessons in Leadership and the Legends Journey.
My guest today is a character, and I celebrate characters. I think this world is devoid of people because we seem to no longer want to stand for, stand out. We chase validation. We're worried about offending people. But what makes this guest extra special is he's not just a character, he's someone of immense character. He's someone that's put a dent in the universe, not just in the advertising sector, but in terms of impacting brands and individuals, and with a stellar career that stretches over half a century. He is one of Canada's original madmen. He is the one and the only Frank Palmer. Frank, welcome to the Legends Journey.
Good morning, and I'm pleased to be here, Tony. Good to be talking with you.
It's just so wonderful to be unpacking your journey, and more importantly, what we're really going to get into is this concept of character and the sort of impact you've made on our industry. But let's just wind it back. I mean, you grew up in Vancouver, and I love this sort of fork in the road that I'd love you to share, where you had two choices. They couldn't be more different in terms of careers.
Well, I was about 19 when I got out of high school. They got rid of me. I think I got pushed out. I didn't have to write any exams. And the choice that I was thinking about was going either to art school, Vancouver School of Art, which is now called Emily Carr, or becoming a police officer. And I actually wrote the test to become a police officer, and I remember it very well. There was 400 people. And what they showed you in the beginning was all the bad people and good people and bad people and crooks and all that stuff. And then 3 hours or 4 hours later, they would show you again, you'd have to pick out the bad people. Well, I was very fortunate that I remembered faces. And I was selected out of 10 people to become a police officer. And back then, when I was 19 years of age, it was a 220 pounds, 6'1", a little bit different today, which things have shifted. And so I was the right size and the weight, I guess, to become a cop. But when I did the physical, it was great. And when I did the psychological tests, I didn't pass. And I didn't find out until 25 years later why I didn't pass. And it was an HR person that said, Frank, I've known you for a long time, and you don't know why you didn't pass. I said, well, they didn't tell me. And then she said, well, they knew you wouldn't take orders. And I said, well, I thought they wouldn't give me a gun. So that's what and then what happened to me, Tony, was fortunately, spending 2 years in art school, there was an opportunity to go to work for KBOS-TV, which is a border station, and I got the job. And I walked in there, and I thought I died and went to heaven. It was $500 a month. And here I am doing artwork. And I was doing the original Beatles cell because KBOS-TV border station had all these drawings of cells, and I was painting the back of the cells. You got a palette, and you say this particular one is red, or this is orange, or whatever it happened to be. So that's what I was doing. And but I still want to be a cop, like be an old Columbo.
Well, I also heard rumors that it wasn't just a cop that's in that mind that where they're trying to push you out of high school was also somebody who wanted to be a comic. I think it was a wrestler, wasn't there?
Yep. Well, I was big enough because back then I used to go to a gym called Broadway Gym, and there used to be Haystack Calhoun and Mean Gene Kaniski and a bunch of wrestlers that were going to the gym, and I was almost as big as both of those guys put together, and I wasn't as big as them, but I thought, hey, this would be a good thing to do. It's entertaining. bit of a show business. Cop is a bit of a, you're a bit of this power and entertaining. Combat, you want people to like you. And I think that when you blend them all together, you become maybe a character like you talked about, because you're kind of on stage and entertaining. And I think clients deal with people they like, and I think you have to entertain these people, on a regular basis.
So there's a lot of young people that are listening to this show, and what I was interested in is how you went from being sort of the hired gun, the graphic artist, maybe even the showbiz person, to very quickly in your career becoming a partner in an agency, and not just a partner that almost, it seemed overnight, you went from being CEO and president. You became the person who was going to drive the business.
Yeah, I think that back in 1969, which your listeners can figure out how old I am, I worked for a direct mail company after KBOS TV, and there were two individuals that used to come in there. One was Red Robertson, which was an original Vancouver rock and roll guy, brought Elvis Presley to Vancouver and interviewed him, and a number of other people, the Beatles, and a guy by the name of Rich Simmons, and they owned a company called Trend Advertising. And so Red wanted to get out, and Rich asked me if I wanted to become a partner, because he was the sales guy, and I was the production and art guy, so that's what he needed. And so I became a partner in Trend Advertising, which turned into about 2 or 3 years later, we took on a guy by the name of Leckie. It became Simmons, Palmer, Leckie, and then Leckie left, and then it became Palmer and Jarvis. And George Jarvis is still a friend of mine today after all these years. He's no longer in the business, of course, but that's how Palmer Jarvis started. And then I started growing the business across Canada.
So talk to me about that, because I was fascinated to see how you managed to put together this sort of very Western group of agencies. But from understanding the financial engineering, that was quite brilliant in terms of how you acquired these companies and created this enterprise.
Well, I had, fortunate enough, we won the McDonald's business in Vancouver, and we also won the Hudson Bay business in Vancouver. And at that time, I got to know all of the operators in McDonald's across Western Canada. The same thing with Hudson Bay Company. So I knew the general managers. He said, well, if you're in Edmonton, I'll give you the business. And if you're in Calgary, we'll give you the business. And so what I did as I went along, and I went into, say, Edmonton, and I talked to John Leggett and Helen Leggett, which were running a company, and a very good company. And they said they got X amount of money in revenue. And I said, well, I got the same amount. Why don't we do a 50-50 deal? So I was able to buy each and every one of the agencies in Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Victoria, and Regina. And all I did was trade the client's revenue. So I never paid not one nickel for every agency, but what we traded was accounts that they had and we had, and put an agency together, which became a very, very good agency across Canada, and partners in all those companies. And I ended up owning about 57 or 60% of the total thing.
And then the next parlay that you do is another quite creative engineering, when you decide you need a Toronto base and a partner that's probably more substantive. So share with us that story, because that's where you kind of go from being Frank fully in control to now putting an elephant in the room.
Well, I was dealing with a few agencies in Toronto that were multinationals and headquartered in New York, and I started dealing with one or two of them. And I went to New York to visit one of the agency senior executives, and from Vancouver, it's about a 5-hour trip, and I love New York, by the way. And I got to the office, and I feel it's pretty good, because this guy's going to come talk to me about my agency, and I'm quite proud of what we have accomplished. And he made me wait in the lobby for about half an hour, and he comes out looking at his watch, like this, and he's going, hey, Frank, thank you for coming. It's a busy day. I got about 10, 15 minutes for you. I fly from Vancouver. You're buying my company. You got 10 minutes for me. Well, I'd made up in my mind, what I was going to do with a finger. I just said, this guy's never going to buy my company. The end of story. But I did get even in a way a number of years later. That wasn't planned by me, but I'll tell you about that.
So tell me about that before we go into that move, because to me, it's like the Decca record guys turning down the Beatles because the world didn't need another guitar band. I mean, how did you get even with somebody that is arguably one of the most powerful and successful advertising people that's ever been minted in Canada?
Yeah, well, John Wren, who was the president of Omnicom, and I was working with John Bradstock and Keith Reinhardt, and I went to New York to do the deal. But in this particular day, I was having a drink with John in the bar, and he said, "Hey, Frank, I'm meeting with so-and-so from this other advertising agency tomorrow. Would you like to come to the meeting?" Actually, would I ever like to come to the meeting? And so I get to the meeting, and I'm sitting there having a coffee with John, and this individual walks in, and he says to the guy, he says, "Brian, you might remember Frank Palmer." And the guy looks at me like you remember Frank? Oh yeah, Frank, Palmer Jarvis, yeah, great. And John looks at him and he says to the guy, "Brian, I'm really bad you didn't buy his agency because he's making us nothing but money." And for me it was like, "John, thank you. I got even with that bastard."
And so how did you end up doing business with Omnicom? How did that all unpack?
Well, it was interesting because at that time, and you could do it what they called a pooling of interest. You can't do it today. And what we did is put a value on our company right across all offices. And I had 11 shareholders, 11 partners. And we did a deal for Omnicom stock. And so we took the stock. And at that time, it had just been $78, and it did a split, and it went to 37. And so all the other shareholders are watching it because they couldn't trade for 60 days. They were nervous because it went to 34, 35. And the minute it started moving up and they had the waiting period was over, they sold their stock. So pretty much everybody except one other individual and I kept our stock, and it went to $65. So I ended up doing a bit better than I would have done anyways.
And what was it like for somebody that didn't deal with authority or wouldn't follow orders from the police, when you're now go from having your hand firmly on the rudder of a business to there's other people that are going to have influence?
Well, it's funny because when we were in that lunch at the Italian restaurant, Keith Reinhardt is probably and John Bradstock, both still friends, probably the nicest people in the world. And Keith said to me, "Frank, you know why we want to do this deal?" I said, "Well, you'd like to take some of our accounts, McDonald's." He said, "No, biggest reason is we want to learn from you." And I said, "Really? Learn from me, a little guy in Western Canada?" No, we're a big company, but we'd like to learn from you. And the thing from me is they left me alone. They didn't come in and change anything. I mean, they one thing you do have to do is make money for them. And we were doing okay because the biggest influence in these holding companies and the guys that drive it are not the people that are presidents. It's the financial officer. They're the ones that drive the business. There's no kidding about that. And at the end of the day, they made us better. They showed us ways of making more money. And you know what? They don't hold any prisoners. If they say your numbers aren't your numbers that need to be, you have too many staff. And this is what's going to happen. You need to get rid of staff. And if you don't want to do that, we'll do it for you.
Just to give a lot of people in the audience probably, I certainly saw your growth. At your peak, you had like 750 employees. You had firing all cylinders. I think you had 3 different businesses. That's substantial growth from, the kid from out west that showed up in New York. They must have learned a lot from you.
Well, I think I was a bit of a deal maker, and I can remember the day when Labatt's actually ended up have to go from one agency to another, and the other agency that was handling it in Toronto, and I phoned the lady that was running the business at that time, and I phoned Labatt's people, and I said, David was running the business at the time, and I said, "Can we pitch your business?" And he said, "Yeah," but I said, "What is it that you like best about your old agency that you can't have now because there's a conflict?" He said, "I like the staff." He said, "I never would have changed agencies." So what I did, with their permission, I said, "If I can hire the staff that ran that business, would you give me the account or could we pitch it?" He said, "Absolutely." So I asked for permission to do that, and I ended up going out and I interviewed all the people that were working for the other agency, and I heard 99% of them, and I went and pitched the business and won it. Now, I don't know why It's just that it was in me to be able to do something because as an artist, you're painting something, and I looked at it as you're painting a structure, and we ended up winning the business, and it was probably one of the best clients we ever had. David Kincaid was the client at the time.
David's a good friend. He's been on my podcast. He's in the Marketing Hall of Legends with you and I, and he's one of the most extraordinary clients. If we could mint clients like that, I think the industry would be in a very different position.
Well, there isn't clients like that anymore, as you and I know. In fact, most of the industry is run by a lot of young people who wouldn't even dig the damn about me. They'd look at me and say, well, I want to talk to that old bird for.
Yeah.
Well, maybe there's something I can teach you.
It's so one of the things you wrote when your first book, I think it's Let's Get Frank.
Right.
You said, I wish I'd known these 3 lessons when I was starting out. And part of this whole idea of Lessons Journey, Lessons in Leadership is to share some of the great wisdom of people like you. So what were the 3 lessons?
Well, I think one of them was stop trying so hard. I think in business that, people try harder than, it's doing what's right. And, there's a client, just out of curiosity, there was a client in my office the other day, and he was asking me about doing his business. So I said, I'm going to take this on myself, and I'm not going to hire any creative people. I'm not going to use my creative people. I'm just going to use what I think is right for you because I've had experience in that area. And he said, fine, that's great. So I come in, and he says to me, well, I kind of like the slogan, but here's a slogan that I think might be a bit better. And I said, what do you do for a living? He said, I'm a plumbing and heating guy. I said, well, I'm going to come over and fix your plumbing and heating for you. How's that? And he said, oh, is that the way it is? I said, yeah. I said, if you either go to your doctor, and the doctor tells you you got something wrong, and if you don't believe him, then go do what you want to do. So I said, either you do what I want to do, or you don't do it at all, because I don't want to do it. I want to do, stop trying to please everybody. You can't. There's too many agencies that will listen to what a client wants, and they know it's wrong, and they do it because they want the money, and they've got no balls. And I'll tell you right now, that's the majority of the agencies, except for the independents. Because the big guys they'll take the money and they'll do everything that's wrong. And the other one was, if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. I mean, we all do it. I mean, I have to admit, I didn't do this overnight. I mean, you get to a point you need the money. But, now you kind of go, I don't want to do it. It's not right, doesn't feel right, it's not going to make a difference. And I think the other one, like in many cases, at the end of the day, a lot of things don't matter. It doesn't matter. Come on. A few things in life contribute to making you happy. I've written probably more Tony, how these all things came about was I'd see somebody in the office, and I didn't like what that person was doing. And I didn't want to confront that person, him or her, personally. So I would write it, frankly speaking. And it would go out to all the staff, 750 people, hoping that one person would see it and change their ways. And so a young guy comes to me one day, and he was doing the flyers for a client, the flyers, and I promoted him from an art director to a senior art director. So this individual decided that not doing flyers was below him now. He wasn't going to do flyers. So at that time, both George and I had to sign paychecks in order for the cash it at the bank. So he gets his paycheck this day. There's one signature on it, what wasn't mine. So he goes to the bank, they wouldn't cash the check. So he comes to me and he says, you forgot to sign my check. I said, no, I don't do that anymore. He said, oh, the flyers. I said, yeah, the flyers. He started doing flyers again. I mean, it was just, people, they go along with it. You got a new title. Well, I don't have to do what I used to do. No, you got a raise, you got a title. You still have to do what you did. You're still an account guy, account person or girl. You still have to do it. No, just because you got a title doesn't mean to say you're going to do anything less or any different, So it's just
the way it is. Talent. Let's talk about it, because you've hired extraordinary people in your life, and I know from personal experience that the top talent can be very nomadic, always chasing the next thing, or where am I going to win the next award? What was your strategy for keeping people, and even the people that left you are still so loyal and talk so highly of that time they work with you. So what's the secret sauce?
Yeah, well, I don't know if there was a secret sauce, but if you're like talking to me right now, I think I'm a pretty down-to-earth guy. I mean, I'll tell you if you're doing something right or doing something wrong. We treated people properly. We paid them good money. I had fun with them. I was never a boss. They know I'm the boss. I don't have to run around with a big stick. I'm the boss. Yeah, here's what I'd like you to do. Well, if you don't want to do it, why? Well, explain to me. Okay, you're right. You don't have to do it. But you got to know if you're a creative person. I come from that creative background. And creative people are very interesting people. They all want to be, want to pat them on the back. They all need this little bit of approval all the time. And this is why award shows are being creative, because they know that these creative people are all on cocaine or heroin. And at one point in time, our cost of doing creative awards were $500,000 a year. And it got to the point where there's a new award show and they're going to enter it. So I, Practical Joker, created the first international creative show that you not only won a trophy, but you won money. And I took a website, I took the marketing or strategy website, and I changed it to make sure that it was the biggest show ever, and you're going to win thousands of dollars. And then I phoned Rupert Brendan, who was running the ICA at the time. I said, hey, there's this new award show out there. What is it? Well, look at it. They've given money out. And of course, he searched it up, couldn't find it. And I knew that as soon as anybody saw that, they're going to enter the award show. And I was going to get a whole bunch of money because there was never an award show. Well, he figured it out, found out that it was me playing the practical joke. And I said, well, the reason I'm doing it is because I know that every award show, these guys are going to enter. So what we ended up doing in the agency was putting a limit of a percentage on what you could. So if you couldn't go beyond 500,000, well, we want to go on the new show. Well, what are you going to cancel then? That was the only way I could do it.
You remind me of your pranks. I me's a great story of George Clooney. He's a great prankster, and he's on the set with Brad Pitt in Ocean 11, and you got the seamstress every day to take Brad Pitt's pants in by 1/8 of an inch. And by the time the week was over, Brad Pitt stopped eating on set because he thought he was just gaining this weight. And you're legendary for your pranks. You're right up there. Do you have I know you have hundreds, but is there one that really stands out that you still, when you think about it, gives you that chuckle?
I had a deal in the office where a guy bought a brand new hat, and like a bowler, And I knew where he got the hat. He got it at a downtown hat store. So what I did was I went down and we bought about 5. We just borrowed. We said, can we, you got so-and-so came in here for a hat. Do you have any smaller sizes? He said, yeah, what do you want? I said, well, I want about 6 smaller sizes. He said, why? I said, well, I'll bring you hats back. I want to have a joke. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I would say it was you, Tony. I'd say, Tony, are you okay? Why? You don't look, you look swollen. You look swollen. Are you okay? And so what we do is we change the size on your hat. And so you put the hat on, it wouldn't be up here. And the next day I said, I know you didn't look any good yesterday, but are you okay? You okay? And the hat would be up here. So eventually the hat was sitting on the top of the head. The guy thought he was getting swollen. I start crying now because And then the other one that I did, I have a little called a remote. It's a universal remote. So I'm in the restaurant that I go in, and there's a TV set here, and there's one over here. And so I'm having breakfast and looking at the news, and I go, turn the TV off. And that guy looks at TV, and he goes over to set it up, and I take the thing, and I go over here, and I turn off the other one. And he looks at what goes over there. By the time he's over there, I turn off the other one. So I did it about 5 or 6 times, and he calls the IS guy up, or IT guy up. The guy comes up, sets them all up again. He said, you should be good now. As soon as he walked out, I turned it off again. I came clean, but I live for a practical joke, but I don't plan the practical joke. They just come to me.
It's just all part of the culture. I want to also talk, I talked about someone of great character, and I want to spend a little bit of time on 2 topics that you have so passionate about: mentorship and NABS. So let's start with NABS, the National Advertising Benevolent Society. co-founded by you. Why did you decide to put a real shoulder behind creating something that would be there for when maybe a job wasn't there?
Well, we had a number of employees that suffered from mental illness or somebody who had an accident. We had a young lady that horseback riding fell off a horse, broke her neck, and of course, that was her life. And NABS, which I knew about, and wanted to help bring it to Western Canada, and I did. And I've stuck with NABS. In fact, they have a golf tournament out here, at least they called the Frank Palmer NABS International Golf Tournament, which we still support to this day. But there's what a lot of young people don't understand is this world has changed, and it's changed more so than ever before. So NABS is more important today than it was maybe 25 years ago because our industry is changing, and everybody thinks when they get into it, they're going to be there forever. They're not. And in fact, a lot of them might not either get in the business or they might be in the business for 2 years because, AI is changing our world again. And NABS needs more money than ever before. So it was just something I felt very, I'm blessed in the business because I've been able to stay in it probably longer than I should, but I've been in the business for a number of years. So NABS was very important to me. And I created these podcasts that I interview various individuals in the industry, and I'm hoping it was make a difference so young people would say, look, we're going to contribute to NABS. So I just wish the industry would contribute more, which they don't. But
I want to talk about mentorship. American Marketing Association, mentorship's one of their pillars. They really believe this exchange of intellectual and emotional currency that happens when somebody that's been around seasoned with somebody young. It's been a big part of your life as well, and you continue to do that with your ad chats and everything else. Do we have enough mentorship in this industry? And if not, what do we need to do to get more of, instead of that being, oh, that's an old person, being, no, that person has immense experience and that currency is of immense value?
Yeah, I think that there's not enough mentors going around. I had a couple of mentors. I had Ron Marcoux, who was the president of McDonald's, and I had another gentleman that ran Vickers and Benson at one time. And there was lots of things I didn't know being a young punk, 40 years of age. And did you ever figure this out? And I would sit in front of them and say, this guy's pushing me around. I don't get it. I just don't get it. I'm the boss. He's pushing me around. And they'd say, he's challenging you. What do you mean? I'm the boss. No, he's challenging. Really? You think that's what it is? Yeah. So the point is that I'd learned something from other individuals who were, 25 years or 30 years older than me. And I think the problem today is young people think that they're going to get experience from other young people. Well, they're not. And who many people run agencies today. The majority of the agencies today that are at the top of the ladder, and whether it's Toronto, it's changing all the time. And a lot of the people that were in the industry when I was in, they're gone, and they're not there, and the mentorship is disappeared, and they're being run by people who are afraid for their jobs because they may end up losing them shortly if business doesn't go their direction. So mentorship is probably more important than ever. And I'm still talking to people that work for me on a regular basis. They call me and say, "Hey, Frank, what did you do during this?" Here's what I did. Oh, that's great. I never thought of that. So for me, mentoring young people is still very important. And I still look for mentors.
You've been very vocal at the quality of advertising that's being created. And I think you do so in a way to try to elevate the clients to chase better creative, and obviously the agencies to be capable of doing that. But what's caused this condition, and what needs to change?
Well, I think that there's strong leadership in an agency and strong opinions are working with clients that just want to get the thing done and are not willing to think about what they're put into an ad. In fact, there's an old line about 10 pounds or whatever in a 2-pound bag. And I think that clients today are asking for too much information, and you skip the ads. There's so many ads on television and on radio that just go right by you because you don't listen to them. And another example of that is the ads that used to be done for Budweiser were fantastic. that were done by DDB and Bud Light and Super Bowl ads that you look forward to, or the Coke Pepsi challenge. And today you don't see much of that. You got so much copy, you don't listen to it. And for me, it's agencies giving up and taking the money. It's basically what it is. And if you don't do it, I'll get another agency that will. I mean, you look at what's happening in some of the telcos. They change agencies every 2 years, and they don't look at themselves as being the person that's wrong.
You know, we just had an example happen where a client decided to pitch their business on the December 23rd, and made a change weeks later. So many people are, you know, the conspiracy theory, it was a preordained change and a move. What can our industry do to push back at clients and say, this is about partnership, this is about collaboration, this is about co-creation versus, you know, this sort of master-servant relationship that seems to be, you know, creeping all over the place?
Yeah, well, I had relationships, partnerships with McDonald's, the Hudson Bay Company. We would socialize, we would become friends. We dined together, we drank together, we traveled together. Doesn't happen today. There's none of that. There may be the odd client that looks at that, but quite frankly, too many clients got to get out of the boardroom and back into doing what they need to do, and they give their responsibility to a marketing person who doesn't have the experience, and they just want to get a job done, and there's no relationship at all. And you have a relationship. If I have a relationship with you and I know what you like, I'm going to buy that particular brand of coffee or booze, and here's a bottle of Chivas. I know you like it. But if you don't know what a person likes, you're not going to be able to satisfy them. And that's just the way it is. And too many agencies are willing to take the money and not give the client what they deserve and need to hear, because they're afraid to tell them to lose the business. And I go, well, you're going to lose it anyways.
One of the words we touched on a bit is sort of risk or fear. And why do you think this industry is at a point where they're more worried about losing a client versus having this insatiable appetite to build that client?
It could be a number of reasons, but for me, I was always able to say what I wanted to say in front of a client, whether they believed it or not. The fact is, I would push for it, and I'd say, trust me that I'm your physician or doctor. That I've been in this business long enough to know that if you do the following, it's going to be good for you. And I think that today's advertising agencies are too worried to offend the client because the client thinks they're right, and they're not willing to risk on what you have to say or your experience. And I go, well, this is what I've done for a living all my life, and I'm telling you what you should do, and then you can fire me if you don't. I had a client that told me that at one point in time I used that swear word. I said, if you don't like what I'm doing, just go screw yourself. And the client was really testing me to see whether or not I was, telling them. And I said, yeah, this is what you should do. And then from that point on, the client went with everything I did and everything I said. And I don't think there's enough guts for a lot of people running agencies today to do that. I think they're too afraid of losing the money. End of story.
And the second thing is, I noticed that in my watch that it seemed like overnight marketers went from having budgets to spend, and with that there was always an appetite for risk, to now having budgets to invest, and data, and wanting to know, research, and wanting to make sure that everything was lined up. You'd bring them a big idea, and instead of going, wow, what can we do with it? It's like, how much is it going to cost? Is it going to work? Do you think that this whole consumed by data is also taking away some courage?
Oh, absolutely. I think that data is used as somebody's excuse for not taking any risk at all. I mean, the fact is, the clients that I've come across that say, well, we're not quite sure about this, or we're not sure about that. They think we need more research. We need to do this. And I go, basically, you're afraid of your job. You're afraid of taking a risk on your job. You want this information, so if it doesn't go quite in the right direction, you can say, well, the research said. No, you're gutless. The best campaigns in the world basically come from creative people that they didn't do any research. They just knew that it's going to work. And today they basically, I understand there has to be a bit of that. But the fact is that there's too much of that, and you get bland advertising, and 99% of advertising is bland. Period.
What did Henry Ford say? If we asked the consumer what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse.
Yeah,
And,
right. Yeah, I know. But I mean, it's like, what ads today can you actually see on TV, or ads that you hear that you pay any attention to? Very few.
So marketers that are coming up, young marketers, what advice can you give them so that they can change the status quo and they can be bolder and have more courage, and in doing so, earn their paycheck because they're building a brand, they're creating equity, they're engaging, they're enlightening, as opposed to just putting something out there saying, look, I did a campaign?
Well, it's a good question, because if you're a young marketer and you're getting a job working, well, first of all, if there's a telco in Canada that needs a young marketer in there that would take chances, which they don't. And unfortunately, what happens is that the agency doesn't take any responsibility for anything. They blame their advertising agency. Change creative directors are changed every 2 years. But the point is that for young people, they have to learn to have some courage and go with what they believe is correct. And I just think that's the one thing that they should do. But, they're nervous about it. I mean, I can always remember all my life I said, well, I think this is the right thing to do. Let's give it a shot. But most clients aren't willing to do that.
Frank, your personal brand, when I got in the business, what Frank Palmer said, everybody paid attention to, not just at keynotes, strategy magazine, marketing magazine. And that's one of the things I learned from was as you sort of had other responsibilities and grew your business, I saw an opening to start putting my opinion out, and it did a lot for me. Is personal branding still an important way for someone to build their career, or if they happen to own an agency, to build their agency? Not talking less about what they do today in terms of a brand or a campaign, and much more about where the industry's heading, and putting a point of view out there that says, this is where I think we should go together.
Well, Tony, you're a brand, and I knew about you, and I knew about a number of other people in the industry that were brands that were running advertising agencies. And quite frankly, when you look at those agencies that had names on the door that were around and very, very successful, the individual that was running the agency was a bit of a character. You take Paul Lavoie, for example. That agency is not the same as it was. Rob Gannett runs it today, and he's a bit of a character. But when you take a look at the agencies that are run by characters, they're very strong individuals. They were good at what they did, and they were listened to. And very few of those agencies are out there today. They realize, they say, there's a handful. But the rest of the agencies, and I mean the big ones that are run by multinationals, there's no personality running them. They're gone.
We can't leave this interview without talking about the title of your latest book, which I'd love you to be out in the world. Just share with us the title and what motivated you to write it.
Well, my dad and I, from the time I was 6 or 7 years of age, would walk to the movie theater. And at the movie theater, he'd buy me some Lifesavers or butterscotch Lifesavers, which are still my favorite. And on the way home, we'd stop off at a little convenience store, and he'd buy a brick of ice cream. And at that time, it was a brick, like a butter brick. And he'd slice it open like this and fold it down. And he'd cut off a slice of the ice cream for me, whether it was Neapolitan or chocolate or vanilla, a little slice about the size of a cheese slice. And he'd eat the rest of the ice cream all by himself. So he had 95% and I had 5%. So if I wanted some more, there wasn't there. And then he would take me next Saturday and do the same thing again. Now, you got to imagine doing this from 6 years of age until about 12. It was torture. So my father was in the hospital. Unfortunately, he was dying of leukemia. And I said to Dad, I'm really upset with you. And he said, why? I said, because you ate all the damn, well, I didn't say damn. I said, you ate all the ice cream. And he said, what are you talking about? So I told him the story, and I said it was torture. So I wasn't sure what I was going to call the book. And then, Frank's lessons. And I said, you know what? People say to me, where do you get that name from? God, I love that name. I love the name of the book. And I thought I was never going to get it published. But they did publish it. So that came about from my dad eating all the ice cream and torturing me for about 6 years.
Can you at least hold up the title? Because people are going to be having to realize that.
Yeah. My dad ate all the ice cream.
So, Frank, I mean, we've covered so much ground today, but some lessons that you could, I mean, you've built brands, you've built careers, you've built your own business. What are 2 or 3 real Frankisms that we could take away that people listening would say, if I applied some of that to my life, maybe I'd be sitting there looking at my 50-year career and knowing that it's still growing?
Well, I'm not sure if I would be able to give you 3 or 4 of them, but I think even to this day that I practice being nice. I practice being responsible. I go out of my way to help people if I can help you. I'm not looking for anything. And I'm always there to be able to share any information that people ask me about. So it's really, and I still love what I do. Not as much as I used to because our world has changed. But for me, it's that how can I help you? And I have people call me all the time. In fact, Chris Staples and I, who used to work for me, are having lunch tomorrow. He called me. Let's go for lunch.
I mean, that transfer of creativity and energy and storytelling is just, it seems so simple, but it's really doesn't exist other than, as you said, if you're open to these conversations.
It used to, but then when you look at the people that are running the agencies today, I think it still exists in certain, I think there's about, without mentioning their names, there's still about 5 independent agencies in Toronto that are substantial that and eventually they're either going to sell or they're going to sell to their staff. And the problem is with the industry now, especially with the small industries, small agencies, and I've said to them, here's the area. We're part of a network called TCAN, and TCAN has about 25 to 30 agencies in small across Canada. They're all agencies that do anything under $5 or $6 million in revenue. And they asked me to come out to talk to the group, and they said, we're talking about succession. And I said, well, it's too late. And they said, well, what do you mean it's too late? I said, well, if you're 50 or 60 and you have an advertising agency in Winnipeg or Regina or Ottawa, there's no large agency that's going to buy your company anymore. Those days are gone. They've passed. There may be the odd agency that might be bought in Toronto, but quite frankly, those days are pretty much gone too. And I said, you want to hear the second part of it that you don't want to hear? They said, what? The only people that are going to buy your agency are the staff. And there's a problem. What's the problem? They have no money.
Yeah.
You're going to sell your agency to the staff, and they're going to sell it to them for nothing because they don't have any money. But that's your only way. That's your only exiting today. So when I exited the company, the business was so much different. So what people don't really understand is our world has changed. It's not the same as it was. Now, is it going to be better or worse? Time will tell. But right now, I still enjoy it, and I come to work every day. I was the first person here at 7 o'clock in the morning, getting ready for you. But if I wasn't, I'd still here around 7:30. And the whole thing has changed again. Is COVID changed our world forever because people are working from home. And the one thing I will say in the interview is, you cannot build a culture for any advertising company or client or anything else working from home.
I was talking to my niece, and she was so excited that she's found a job where they allow remote working. And I said, terrific, what an opportunity. Get in the office every day. She goes, what do you mean? I said, no, your competitors, people that are going after the next job, are going to be home looking at a screen. You're going to be in the office every morning. The boss is going to see you when they walk in. That's how early you should be in there. And don't think it's beneath you to bring a coffee and sit down and ask, would you mentor me? Or I've got a question. Is there anything else I can do? Take advantage of the fact that everybody else is asleep and you're awake. And it was so hard to get it through her because to me, but the commute and the travel and the transit, I said, then your longevity is going to be limited because technology is always going to be faster, better, and cheaper at transactions, but never at transformation. So if you're not part of the transformation of the business, get out of the way. Anyway, so I'm curious what you said about AI, which I loved. AI is not going to take away your job, but if you don't use AI, you won't have a job. And I'd love you to just...
on the back of the book, that's what's on the back of the book. And I wrote that because I've used AI, chat. And I come to it, and I've written a plot for a movie or a plot for a concept, and I type it into AI, Chat GPT, and I go, my goodness, wow, that even made it better than what I sounded like. So the fact of the matter is that your AI is not going to come up with its own creative thoughts or process, but if you don't use it, it will replace people in the industry for sure. Because when I wrote a plot for a movie, and the movie was called Robin Hood's, and Robin Hood was the sheriff of Nottingham that stole from people to give to the rich. And the Robin Hoods today is the industry and people that are politicians that are taking from the poor for themselves. And so I put the plot into ChatGPT, and it wrote my movie for me. So I got to tell you, I mean, it's not good for everything, but it's going to take over and do a lot of things for the industry. And if you don't use it, you're silly, because it's going to help you keep your job.
You know, Frank, I always close my show with my 3 takeaways. And the first one is, as I said up front, you're not just a character, but you have immense character. And you don't often see that together, because characters like to stand out, but people with immense character like to stand for. And you found a way to weave those together. And that's something that's to be celebrated. It's a lesson learned. Second one, which is a word that just absolutely roared through this, is the importance of having courage and conviction. Even as a young individual, that you have to have a voice. Just nodding and saying yes is just a desperate way to hold on to a job or hold on to a client. But the third thing, and I think is a great lesson for all the clients out there, is instead of blaming the agency, or instead of getting so layered in research to sort of just protect your territory, be bold and mighty forces will follow. This Canada is, we punch outside our weight class because we have the ability to do beautiful and big things like you've done your entire career. So great lessons in character, having this sense of courage and conviction, and not being afraid to be bold and to do extraordinary things. So for all of that and more, Frank Palmer, it's been an absolute delight to having you on Chatter That Matters and these lessons in leadership with the American Marketing Association.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And anytime you want to chat, please just call.
It's Tony Chapman. Thanks for listening, and let's chat soon.